So what you're asking for is that our sport is completely different from any other sport on campus where if I'm a swim coach, if I'm a volleyball coach, if I have my 50-mile radius to coach my club teams, you're taking away all those opportunities for soccer coaches only.
Well, there are actually some sports that have limitations on prospect age kids. I think basketball is one of them. And I think that there's other sports that are in similar situations we are in terms of trying to slow down this recruiting process. I know the lacrosse coaches have put together a package of proposals. Unfortunately, they did theirs in pieces, and so being in pieces, it's had a hard time passing. Even had a hard time getting some support from the NCAA in terms of it being in pieces. I know volleyball, softball, at least at our school, those sports have expressed the same concerns in terms of the early recruitment that we have. I think soccer is kind of just leading the way in terms of the early recruitment getting more out of hand quicker than maybe in some other sports. And that's why we need to sort of put a halt to this.
So you're asking for a massive sea change in the way our sport is organised from probably under 8s through under 18. Are there any other organisations who feel that this is important? Obviously, the way we operate at the moment, some clubs are very, very powerful in the way our game is organised and operated. So you're asking them to make some radical changes in the way they think about things.
Well, I think the problem with that is it's got to start somewhere. The clubs, ODP, none of those people are going to change when they have access to college coaches as their main source of options to be coaches for their club or ODP teams. People want to do that because of the inherent advantage it gives you recruiting. So if there's that inherent advantage, it's just a fairness issue to where why do we allow some people to have that advantage and some people to not have that advantage based on the area of the country you live in, whether or not you're chosen to be on a particular staff. I mean, there's people who want to participate as ODP coaches who aren't asked. There are people who want to participate as national team coaches who aren't asked. And I think that inherently gives advantage to those people who are. And that's something that, to me, that's a no-brainer. It's, even if we pass nothing else, that should be passed because it's just a fairness issue. And it has precedent in other sports. I think the more legitimate complaint is the income issue for assistant coaches, and I think that's something that does affect people in different ways. But I think that the system will change based on the changes we make. If we start it, clubs will have to change, ODP will have to change, because they won't have that pool of coaches that they've had in the past to rely on, and that may or may not be a really good thing. Okay, this next part of this is probably the most difficult part to enforce, which is it's impermissible to make an offer to a player prior to August 1st following their junior year. So you can't make an offer to a player, you can't make an offer to their parents, you can't make an offer to their coach, but how do we monitor that or legislate that? And I'm not sure there's a good way to do that. And we can't legislate ethical behavior from our coaches. It's going to have to be a trust situation and an educational process to the prospects. If we pass something like this, it has to be really important that we educated the parents and the kids that if you do receive an offer prior to August 1st before your senior year, then that's illegal. The second part of that is you can't accept phone calls from prospects prior to August 1st. So kids will call you probably. So it's the same as if we bump into a kid at the field and you're allowed to say hello, but sorry, I can't talk to you. It would be the same on the phone. So if you say, hey, I appreciate your phone call, but I can't discuss this with you until August 1st before your senior year, and then that ends the conversation. The calls are a little easier to monitor than the offers. What stops me from calling a club coach and saying, hey, I really, really like Susie Smith. We're going to really take care of her. So technically, I haven't made an offer to her, but I think it's implied what the situation is going to be there. I mean, that's the part that we really can't enforce, and I'm not sure how the NCAA will respond to that part of the proposal.
I think it's unenforceable, basically. I mean, as Becky has mentioned, it's easy to intimate what sort of offer you're going to make to a kid by the language you use or what you say. I mean, for me, that's unenforceable. How you're going to do that, I've got absolutely no idea.
But then how do you enforce if I run into you at the field And I mean, maybe not even at the field, because the field's a little bit more public where people can see you. What if I run into a prospect at the grocery store and I want to sit and chat with her for 5 minutes or 20 minutes? That's not enforceable too. You know, I can do it, but it's just whether or not I'm willing to break the rule. I mean, that's a rule right now that we currently have that's basically unenforceable.
Sure, and you have to question everybody's ethics, whether they're going to enforce any of those things. But for me, I mean, that's impossible to do.
And I think, again, one of the biggest parts of this comes with there would have to be a major educational component to club coaches, to parents, to prospects as to what these rule changes are and whether or not someone is making them offers or making them, breaking any rules without even the kid realizing it. If the kids are aware of the rules, I think the coaches will be a little less likely to try and break the rules. I think the bottom line for us is, if you think that the early recruitment is a problem, if you think that it's getting out of hand and it's only going to continue to go down the road, for example, with football where a kid commits each weekend, and then you're left as a coach saying, well, is it a hard commit, a soft commit, a quiet commit? If we want to go down that road, that's exactly where we're headed. And that's just the reality of where we're headed. If we want to try and change things, the only way to try and change things is to be bold. We talked in the SEC meeting about moving this to a junior year date and then saying that you could take official visits in your junior year. But the bottom line was, we thought, okay, whenever we say you can start to have contact, give about a 6-month period after that is when they're going to commit. And so we felt like the only reason to not do it in their senior year is because it's kind of a bold proposal. Why are we saying their senior year? Well, because when we were recruiting in their senior year, things were not out of hand. You were dealing with the kids. You were having official visits. All those things that were happening. Was it ideal? No, not necessarily, because it put a lot of burden on us during the season. But was it best for what the kids' situation was in terms of them being able to make a decision? I would argue, yes, it was better for the kids when they were making a decision in their senior year than it is now. But that's basically the crux of the argument. And Alan, do you have any other points you would like to make?
My final point would be, I think this is very self-serving for college coaches. I think they see themselves as maybe a little bit apart from the rest of the soccer community, and maybe this argument should be presented in front of US Soccer, USYSA, the Olympic Development Program, and yourselves in order to come up with some sort of answer that's going to be ultimately good for the players.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line, is us trying to decide what's best for the players, not necessarily what's best for us as an individual institution or even just as us collectively as soccer coaches. But if nothing else, we hope we have stirred your thought process on this, and we'll go forward.
Thanks, bye.